Welcome to the 4 bells for Workout from Home, number 101. We are here beginning week 3 of our squat strength and mobility cycle. Today we've got more of a focus on the posterior chain, but we are still training the legs, we're still training flexibility, and we're still hopefully going to get better at those squat patterns. So how are we going to get ready for our focus today? We are going to do 3 things in our warm-up. We are going to start with a basic squat hangout. You should be very comfortable at this point in week 3, feeling so ever so joyous at the bottom of that squat. We're going to hang out for 30 seconds, and you can play around in whichever way you like to. From there, we're going to do some inchworms, looking at flexibility through the hamstring, and maybe even throwing in a cheeky little push-up if you're in the mood. From there, the windmill, we are going to look at lateral chain flexibility, so basically can I mobilize all one side of me, and we are going to do 10 of those guys. So it's going to be 30-second squat hangout, 5 inchworms, 10 windmills, 5 per side. We're doing those for 3 rounds, there we go, in the warm-up today. Squat hangouts, they are the flavor of this 6-week cycle. So by now we should be very comfortable with hanging out in those deep squat positions. So as always, if we can, heels should be on the floor. Ideally we want the knee and toe tracking in the same line. Lots of smush between hamstring and calf, keeping our chest up as much as we can. And of course, try and find the bits that feel tight for you. So if you find it's that ankles are tight, try and play around with shifting weight, try and increase that ankle dorsiflexion. If you find the adductors or the groin is tight, try and play around with external rotation from the hip. So of course, find the things that feel tough for you, and we're going to be there for 30 seconds. From there, when we get into our inchworm, we have to start standing up, which is a little bit nicer. I'm going to bend over, and then from here, I'm going to walk the hands out. If you're in the mood, we can do a push-up, but if you're not in the mood for a push-up, you don't have to do one. From there, keeping the legs as straight as possible, I come back in and stand up. I curl down, walk it out, push up, legs as straight as we can as we come back in. Whew. Last but not least, we come into the windmill, and this can be done at body weight or with a very light dumbbell or kettlebell. I'm going to set the feet up. If my left arm is up, my feet point to the right. From here, we do the bump, we look at the hand, and we come down as low as we can to the floor. So if this front leg bends a little bit, not the end of the world, but I'm trying to get this back leg straight as possible, and we'll be doing 5 per side of a windmill. Today's strength focus is all about the posterior chain. We are really trying to look at the low back, the glutes and the hammies. We're trying to give all of them a lot of attention today. We are going to be doing 4 sets. So each set will be 4 minutes and 30 seconds long, split up into 3, 1, 2, 3, 90-second windows of time. So with all of these exercises today, what we should be trying to do is either build significantly in difficulty as we go throughout the sets, or finding a level that's tough and then staying there and thinking about consistency and quality of the reps. We're going to start off with the good morning, which is a great exercise for the posterior chain, but can be sometimes dangerous if you have super tight hamstrings or a kind of creaky low back. So we're going to talk about how to do those safely and make sure that you're getting to those positions in a beautiful way without hurting yourself. We'll be doing 12 good mornings, and if we can, adding a little bit of load as we go through the sets. From there, we'll be getting into hip thrusts. So with hip thrusts, ideally we're going to be using a bench supporting our upper back. And you can do hip thrusts with either a barbell, if you're lucky enough to have one at home, or just with a very simple booty band around the knees. We'll be doing 20 hip thrusts, block 20. From there, last but not least, our structural piece, which is meant to not only look at reinforcing compromised positions through the low back, but also strengthening those compromised positions as well as building flexibility through the hamstrings. We're going to do the Jefferson curl today. We're going to do those for 10 reps at that 2-0-2-0 tempo, which is a fancy way of saying slow on the way down, slow on the way up. Let's take a look at how all 3 of these should work. So with good mornings, if you are lucky enough to have a barbell and a rack, feel free to use it. And of course, if you don't have a barbell, we'll talk about some other options using either a dumbbell or a kettlebell. When it comes to doing a good morning, what we're going to think about is that Romanian deadlift position. So that means we're looking to really push the hips back, stretch the hamstring and the glutes. But what we're trying to do is maintain that flat and neutral spine. Of course, now the weight is going to be in my upper back rather than in my hands, which means I'm in an unfavorable leverage position in terms of where the weight is relative to my pivot point, which means it's going to be harder. which also means it's going to be tougher on the low back, which also means we need to be more conservative when performing our reps. So if you haven't done good mornings in a long time, start light and see how you feel. The range of motion is going to be dictated by hamstring flexibility, so bear that in mind. Set up as if you were going to do a regular back squat. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to pull that bar down onto my shoulders. From here, all I'm going to do is set up my feet, point the chest at the wall as I push the hip back. I'm going to get as low as I can, but of course, it's not always about being like completely parallel to the floor. Find the range of motion where you can keep that stretch, keep that engagement through the hamstring and the glutes, and of course, a big hip drive forwards. Big stretch, 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 and then drive it forwards. So of course, if you don't have a barbell, the next option would be with a kettlebell. So with that in mind, all I need to do is take my kettlebell, bring it behind me, hold onto the handles, set myself up in the same way, push the hips back, load the hamstring, load the glutes, drive the hips forwards. And that is what we are looking for in our 12 reps of a good morning. For the hip thrust, we are doing 20 reps today, so a very high volume, really touching on muscular endurance for the glutes in a big way. When it comes to setting up, we want to think that whatever we are resting our upper back on, whether it's a box, a bench, the edge of the couch, should be reasonably soft. We don't want a sharp edge, and it should be set up just below the shoulder blades, obviously on the other side of my body. If you are going to use a barbell, it's a bit of a difficult thing to set up on a higher bench, so you've got to play around with how your setup's going to work, so bear that in mind. I'm just going to use a booty band because that's probably what most of you guys have at home. All I'm going to do is set myself up, make sure I am just below the shoulder blades on the edge of my bench. I'm going to make sure I've got 90 degrees in the knees and the hips. I'm going to look forwards, squeeze the glutes, pull the pelvis up towards me in a posterior pelvic tilt. I let the hips sink all the way down, driving the knees out, we push all the way back up. Hips down, drive the knees out, push all the way back up. I find a spot on the wall. I do not let my gaze come off that spot on the wall. 20 reps of a hip thrust. As we discovered doing Jefferson curls recently, they're really going to be dependent on how flexible your hamstrings are. So if you've got very tight hamstrings, the Jefferson curl is very tough straight out the gates. But if you've got very flexible hamstrings, you might find that doing it on the floor is too easy. Maybe you need to stand on a step and elevate yourself up so you can increase your range of motion. Either way, with the Jefferson curl, I'm trying to think about that rounded back position, which means I'm going to bring the chin down to the chest. I'm going to hold on to maybe a light dumbbell, and I'm going to think I'm keeping my chin and my chest as close to my legs as possible. I'm going to come down as far as possible. Maybe it's the toes, maybe it's not. And I curl slowly back up. Chin to chest, we curl down. And as low as you possibly can, maybe we're increasing range of motion every single rep, every single set. And that is the aim of the game of the Jefferson curl. Of course, we're in a compromised position with the spine. That's on purpose, is to build integrity in the spine. So start light, and you don't need to take it to the limit. Today's conditioning piece is very simple. We have got some explosive leg work with some running. So what we're trying to do today is do 2 small 5-minute AMRAPs with a 2-minute rest in between. So in our first 5-minute AMRAP, we're going to start off with some jumping squats. We're going to do 10 jumping squats. As soon as my jumping squats are done, I'm then going to come immediately in a 100-meter run. So we'll talk about the options if you can't get outside for whatever reason, but we do try and encourage you to get outside and get running today. So 10 jumping squats, 100-meter run, back and forth for 5 minutes. We then take a 2-minute rest before we come into our second 5-minute AMRAP. We'll be doing 10 jumping lunges, 5 per leg, 10 total, and then out for another 100-meter run. So we're looking to look at muscular or power endurance really in the legs. Can we repeatedly perform explosive activities and try and keep that heart rate nice and high as we do those short, sprinty distances? Let's take a look at both of those movements. So before we talk about exercises in both of our AMRAPs today, before we talk about jumping squats and we talk about jumping lunges, first of all, we're going to talk about aerobic options today. So of course, if you can get outside for a run, find somewhere that's 50 meters away from your house or your apartment, turn around, sprint back. It should be fast. But if for whatever reason you cannot access outside easily, maybe you're in a very tall condo building, then what we need to think about is some other option. So you could do high knees, back can be a good thing. You could do jumping jacks. Either way, I'd say probably 20 to 30 reps, roughly about 20 to 30 seconds, because that's how long, at the very most, the 100-meter run should take you. And of course, if you don't have anything, if you don't want to do that, but you have access to a machine like a rower or a bike, you could do your 100-meter sprint on a rower, or you could do 200 meters on a bike. So think about what you have available. It shouldn't take you longer than 30 seconds to get that 100 meters done. When it comes to jumping squats and jumping lunges, they are very explosive, and more so than being explosive, it's about your ability to absorb force when you land. So that means when we're doing our jumping squats, of course I'm going to squat all the way down, jump, can I land without everything falling apart or causing you a bunch of joint pain? If you can't, then just regular body weight squats for 10 is perfectly fine. Of course, when I'm doing jumping lunges, the same rules apply. Can I receive my body weight nice and comfortably without smashing my knees into the floor or hurting my joints? And if I can't, just a lunge of any kind for 10 reps is perfectly fine. So our first 5-minute AMRAP today is 10 jumping squats, 100-meter run, back and forth for 5 minutes, 2-minute rest. And our second AMRAP is 10 jumping lunges, 5 per side, and again, another 100-meter run, back and forth for our last 5 minutes today. Enjoy Workout from Home number 101, and we will see you next time.